How's it going, everybody? I'm Drifty from Driftwood Gaming, and thank you for joining me in the next episode of Natural Explorers, the Let's Make a Game for 2018. Last time we talked about doing a credit.txt, and I forgot to add White Dragon, so we've added White Dragon. Another thing I'm going to do, it'll apply to these episodes in specific. If you leave a comment below about a good suggestion, I'm going to have a text file that shows a simplified version of what you said and the ideas that I can take from your comments. I do read all the comments, so if you have something you want to say about this series, please let me know in the comments below, and we'll add it to the idea comments.txt that will be included in this game. We're going to be renaming the dagger to knife. We'll look at some of the other stuff that's techno magier has said. We're going to be adding a fishing rod and a shovel, maybe even like a scythe or something to cut down some plants. But anyway, let's rename the knife and add the fishing rod and the shovel. There we go. Okay. If we start the game, we can see that we have no title screen, so I want to kind of fix that in this episode. Let's address the title, the blank title screen. For that, I'm going to be using Photoshop, but you can use GIMP, you can use Paint.net. There's so many resources that you can use for it. Since the game is 1280 by 720, I'm going to use that resolution. When I save files with Photoshop, I usually save them as a .psd, but also as a JPEG if I'm going to be using them for like a thumbnail. But if I'm going to be using them for video game art, I prefer to save them as a .png. So I'm creating this one, Natural Explorers Title 1.png. So I'm going to take this file that I saved as a PNG and copy it and paste it into the IMG Titles 1. That'll let me select it on the title screen inside the System tab. And we're not drawing the game title, we're having that unchecked, that way we can just draw it with our own font instead of the game font. Now we have a background title. It was completely random and arbitrary. I kind of scribbled, as you've seen, just put some text using the font that I liked. I threw some filters on it, that's it. And it looks way better than a default one already. The next thing I want to do is probably add another plugin or two. I want to set up our parameters different from the curves inside the classes here. I want to be able to control our parameters based on our level. So I'm going to use a Yanfly plugin for that. I'm going to use Yanfly's base parameter control, so I can put a link in the description for you. I'll just right click on English Mirror, save link as, and we're going to put this inside of the game's JS plugins folder. Once it's inside the JS plugins folder, it'll be available to select right here in the plugin manager. And for the most part, I'm going to keep it set up how the parameters are already set up in here. And the formula for all of them is base plus D plus times the parameter rate times the buff rate plus a flat amount. And we can change the minimums we want, but I'll leave them all like that. The next thing I want to add is class base parameters. It's an extension to the previous plugin. This plugin is really awesome because it makes it simple to understand and easy to set up all of your stats. So we're going to use something very akin to this. Go to our Explorer, we'll put in, we'll go to our note tags inside the classes tab, and we'll put in custom class parameters. And we're going to define our stat points based on our level and other factors. So let's define what we want as a base rate. I think it would be a good idea to simplify some as well. So not only are we changing our parameters, but we're also changing our experience growth rate. This is going to make it so that whatever our level is, times 1,000 is going to be the requirement for the next level. This will give us a little bit more control when we want to award experience for leveling up. We don't have to rely so much on this experience curve to make this work. So this is going to give us a little bit more control. I'm going to go with this. Starting off very generalized, where your character is a base stat of your level times 10. Inside of every time you level, all of your stats will go up by 10, and we'll probably award different gear to specialize in what you want those stats to do. Leveling up your character will be great because everything will increase, but you'll be specializing with your gear. Might as well add a few more abilities to our character while we're here. Let's go ahead and give the main actor the ability to have all of these things. Once we've set up custom class parameters, it no longer matters what our experience curve is set to, because it's going to be ignoring this, as well as this. I'm gonna hop in game real quick. Great. All of our stats have been adjusted. We can see that we need 1,000 to the next level, and everything is set to 10. It's a really good idea to jump into the game every time you add a new plugin, just to see if something breaks. I also noticed that we have 4 empty party members here, which we need to change in system. You may have noticed that we had 4 party members that had no icon because they're using these actors. But if we go to system, it doesn't look like there's anything here, but there actually is. So what we're gonna do is click here and press delete, 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 delete. And now there's actually nobody in that spot. We can add people if we want. We'll hit apply, double check to see if that works like I want it to. Now we have no ghost members. Okay, so we gotta do something about this map and change the font probably. Let's do the font first. So I went to this site, 1001 free fonts, and there's plenty of fonts here. Let's find something we like and that's free. Unfortunately, many of these have buy commercial license, so if we do plan to sell the game, we can't use it unless we buy the license, which I'm going to avoid these because there's enough free ones to not have to pay for many of these things. I'm not opposed to paying for resources, but I don't think we need to for the font in this particular instance. 100% free for commercial use, Font Squirrel. So let's check out Font Squirrel instead. It's very important to find the font you want to use very early in the creation of your game. Reason being, once you add a lot of show text, changing the font at that point is going to cause many extra hours of work for realigning what fits in a box, especially if you change font size. Pick your font and its size very early in the game and kind of stick to it. There's many ways you can go about changing the font in your game. One easy way is to go into the fonts and simply add the font you want to use. Be sure to double click the font you want to use and click install. When selecting a font, make sure that all of the extra exclamation points and question marks and numbers apply that actually work in it, because you're going to probably want to show these in the text at some point. So you may find a really cool looking font, but it doesn't have numbers for some reason. Probably want to skip over that font. Now, a good way to change this is to click on the font you plan to use, press F2, hit Control and C. That's going to copy it. Remember the file format that it's using, .ttf. If you don't see the file extension, you may need to go into your folder settings and show file extensions. It's just a checkbox. Click on Game Font and hit F2, and then move all the way to the end and type in .txt. It'll ask you if you want to change it. You can say yes. Hit Enter again. Now, inside of the @font face, we're going to replace this M+ TTF name with the actual font we're going to use. Remember to use .ttf at the end if it's a .tt. We're going to hit File Save. Now when you do it this way, it won't always work. So remember the font name, don't delete the default font here yet, because you may need to put that back until you find a font that's going to work. You may find the perfect font, it looks amazing, and you want it in your game, but it just simply doesn't load when you run the game. That could happen. Just be prepared for that. Keep your default font until you find one that actually loads. So as soon as you change your gamefont.css text file, you want to rename it back by getting rid of the .txt extension. So let's see if it actually works. We got it. See, now it works. Instead of using the default font, game font has been redefined as a different font. We have this other thicker looking font. Cool. The game may hang up at this point and say resources not found, or it'll just basically say loading for a long time until the game crashes. If that's the case, pick a different font or check your spelling inside the .css file, which would be currently a .txt. We've changed our font. That's a very easy and kind of like a hard-coded way of doing it. You can also use plugins for that. I'm trying to keep my plugin list as small as possible. That's why I did it this way, but feel free to change the method that you use to control your font. All right, the next thing I want to do is add a new map, and we're going to call this world map for now. And since the majority of the game is going to take place on a single world map, I'm going to make it a pretty large map. As a general rule, you don't want to have huge maps. For the sake of this game, in its weird particular method that I'm planning on setting up the game and the scope of the game, even though I'm saying the scope is small and creating a huge map, it's because the majority of the game is going to be on the single map. That's why I'm going to choose to have a large map. I might actually reduce the height to 150. So 200, 150, just to give it more of a easily zoomable look when I zoom out. I'll continue to change this. There, I'll go with that. Now, since I've decided to use the overworld tile set, I want to change it up a little bit because I'm going to use the default RTP for this overworld, but I'm going to change the actual RTP. So how would I go about doing that? There's several ways. I'm not going to modify it too much, but I am going to try to modify it a little bit. How I'm going to do that is in Photoshop. I'll open the database, I'll go to tile sets, I'll look at the overworld. On the images, I'm going to look at what images the overworld is currently using. I'm going to be using world A1, world A2, world B, and world C. I'll go into Photoshop and load those. Those files will be found inside the game's IMG file sets folder. If you're loading multiple files inside of Photoshop, most will let you load multiple at the same time. I'm going to go down to the world tile set, hold down the control button and select them all at the same time. World A1, World A2, B, and C, and that'll be good for now. We've got these 4 files loaded, and they'll put them in the tabs, separate tabs. I want to just kind of change it a little bit and rename them as something different, and then copy paste all of the settings and the tile sets of the system that they look a little less default. They're still going to be noticeably default, but they'll be modified default. So I think what we'll do is desaturate a little bit and maybe change the hue a little bit to one direction. Not very much though, because they are pretty much naturally where they should be, but we'll just shift it a little bit. We'll give it a -5 and a -20 on the saturation. So we're shifting this a little bit to the more yellow-red side, and we're getting rid of some of the saturation, adding a little bit of lighting. I'm also going to add a little bit of brightness and contrast. With the vibrance, since we took out some saturation, we can add more vibrance, or we can also adjust more saturation right here. I'm gonna put this back to 0 because I'm controlling saturation in another filter. I'll take 10 of the vibrance as well. I'm kind of doling out the tile set so it's less super saturated and colorful. You may want to go the opposite direction, and that's perfectly fine. Once I've got these 3 filters set up kind of how I want, replicate them on the others so that I have like a similar look. Going -5. So I've got my filters very similar on each one of these. I'm going to save these files as a different file name as to not overwrite the actual defaults. You could just overwrite them if you really like your changes and you're not going to use the defaults. I'll keep the defaults in case I want to go in the opposite direction later on. You can always create a new project, just take the files from that as well. But what I'm going to do is just save these as an extension. So this is world A1_dsat, and I'm just going to save for desaturation. I'll save them where they need to be. I'm not going to save them as a PSD, I'm just going to save them as PNGs. I'll save as world A2_dsat. So I've got the 4. Now that I have 4 new images, well, they're very similar, right? What I'm gonna do is copy with Control C and paste with Control V. And this is overworld underscore desaturation. So I'll take these 4 images and replace them with their desaturation. You can see a very minor change. It just took away a lot of the color and made it a lot more kind of bland, or I don't know, realistic, because they're super saturated from what I can see. Like I said, if you want to go the opposite direction, feel free to do that as well, and you can make them more saturated if you like that sort of very cartoony look. We'll change the tile set from overworld to overworld desaturation. Now all of these are a little bit lighter and easier to stare at for a longer period of time. We've just modified the RTP very slightly to give us something different. I'm going to start off with a little island in the middle. Water is a good way to restrict the player early on. So let's start off in the middle with a little bit of a small circle island. And I'll think that as you get farther from the center, there'll be higher yielding resources. That's a good way to think about it. The beginning of the game will have a lot of resources, smaller yielding resources. And then as you get farther, they'll like be spread out more, but they'll be higher yielding. Everything's always up for change. Create our player starting point and get an idea of how big this is, the little starting island. Okay, there's enough space on this island. I'm probably going to allow running. Why not let the player run? Better. Now that we have a little island here, we can start decorating it. We have a huge map, that's right. It's harder to decorate larger maps, but the upside is everything is blocked off with ocean and we're focusing on a little island in the middle. So let's throw down some mountains. All right, we've got a very crappy little map with a starting point. This is probably all going to be adjusted several times, but I don't want to get too hung up on details. I'm not trying to show off my amazing mapping skills. Let's add a little starting town or something that we could use as the source of our base income. We'll start with maybe something that looks like this. Also considering just using an event with images on it. Have one that will not change from the beginning and then have many other ones that will be upgraded. You know what, let's go ahead and go with that idea. I kind of like that. So I'm gonna erase this. Go to the event layer. Right here in the center, we'll start a new event, and this is going to be using images from probably this map, which I need to change. I can see that this map is not set up correctly. I'll have to add this to a tile set. So you know what, let's go ahead and do that. Say we've got this art resource that we've downloaded, but we try to put it in the game and it just doesn't quite select right. Like, let's just give an example. Like, okay, I want to select this first town, but it looks like this, and we look at it in game and it just doesn't quite look right. How would we go about changing this so that it actually becomes something that we can put inside our tile set? Let's do that. So we can take the art assets that we've downloaded and maybe used. We can copy that and put the maybe used into our tile sets, because this is a tile set 1. Now that it's here, it should populate a list inside of the images. So let's say on D, maybe we can find it. This is Costets. And if we go to D, here we have another list. When you're adding new images to a tile set, the 0, the O, means that you can walk over it. Your character will walk over it. If you want the image to block the character, use an X, and that'll stop the player from being able to walk on it. If you want the player to be able to walk behind it, you can use the star, and that means the player will appear behind this image when it walks over it. We walk past it, it'll look like this image is in front of the character, but we won't be able to go down and walk like directly through it. So we X and star, and that seems to work pretty good. For this, we can go like, don't let the player walk. Actually, 0 would look fine on this side. On this side, we can X it out so that the player won't be able to walk onto it, but it's up to your perception and what you think. I'll say block the player from walking through the walls, but let the player walk into here. And also, I guess, block this so the player will be able to walk into this little entrance, and then you can do a transfer event on this entrance right here. We'll try to do something with this. We've added this to D on our overworld DSat. Now we've added a new image to D. You can see that we have more stuff to click and add. Let's go ahead and take all of this. You can select multiple things from the tile set right here by clicking and dragging with the left click. So I'm gonna select all of this by doing that. Go to the draw layer and just stamping that down by left clicking and dragging if I have the box. But I can also stamp it if I click on the, like that. Let's undo that. We'll go back to the event layer and move our event over here. Edit this and get rid of the image. Since we've added the image to the extension to the image, we can also add events using tile set right here. So even though it doesn't quite work by drawing it, it does work for using it as events. So it's up to you however you want to do it. You see how it doesn't quite work in characters. That's why we took it out. If you want it to work, you would have to add it to a tile set and then reference the tile set. Everything works up until this point. Adding stuff to the tile set like that does not work. You just have to add it as tile set D, add it as image D. Well, we still have a ton of work to do. I'm gonna cut the episode here. We're already over an hour in recording, but I'm sure it'll be edited down quite a bit. Thank you guys so much for joining me on episode 2 of Natural Explorers Let's Make a Game for 2018. We've done quite a few things in this episode. If you do enjoy these videos, please give it a thumbs up, like, favorite, share, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. If you would like to back me on Patreon, I'd really appreciate that. Patreon.com/driftwoodgaming. If you would like to support this channel but you don't have money to throw at it, that's perfectly fine. We'd love to have you come hang out in the Discord. The link's in the description below. If you have suggestions for this game, please leave them in the comments below. I will read all the comments and respond back to you guys. I really like the engagement for these types of videos. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay awesome. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.